Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the first official episode of the Summoning Circle. I'm Brinley, the Real Bryn Shady, and joining me tonight is Scotty from Aushammer.
Hey.
And the infamous, the famous, the local celebrity of Infinity, Marty from the White Noise podcast. How you going, man?
Very well. Thanks for having me on your video cast tonight. I feel like a bit of a nerd, and I'm the only one with a big old microphone and some headgear on.
Oh man, you're good. Ours are just hidden. We've got the massive microphones right here. Scotty's. How much did yours, Scott? How much did it cost? Like $35.
$5, I think. It was an eBay China special.
What a steal! So good. Oh man! All right. So a lot of you are probably wondering, what is Infinity talk show host doing on primarily Warhammer 40k podcast video show, I guess. And the reason is that we're expanding, or I'm just overly excited about Infinity.
Really expanding is what it is.
I'm expanding. I'm expanding my hobby collection, downgrading one side, expanding the other. We all know how it goes. Just mountains of unpainted plastic crack. That's the end of the day. Doesn't really matter. So I got into Infinity recently after a friend of mine told me that there was this game that I could play with only basically 6 miniatures and still have a decent game in under an hour. And I told him that was absolute horseshit, and I didn't believe him. And then he showed me Infinity, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And we've done a few videos on the show between promotional products and actually getting building my Pano Force, which has been very exciting. I haven't painted them yet, but I've remained generally willfully ignorant of everything regarding Infinity because I thought if anyone's going to explain it to me, might as well be Marty from the White Noise podcast.
Yeah,
so here we are.
No, I'm more than happy to. So it's good to see that you picked up some Pano, which is known as the Hyperpower. It's one of the factions that I play, and I've got to agree with you. It's sort of I don't know a single gamer that just plays a single sort of game. I myself play a bit of Guild Ball, play a bit of Star Wars Legion, and I think we've all played sort of many games over the years, and I tend to have about 3 on the go at any one time. But I've been running Infinity probably for about 4 or 5 years now, so yeah, really enjoy it.
That's really cool. What got you into it?
I suppose when I first started playing Infinity, I was playing a bit of War Machine at the time, and I wasn't overly enjoying it. And a few of my other friends played Infinity. They said, "Why don't you come roll some dice with us and play this game?" And I did. And it's actually produced by a Spanish manufacturer called Corvus Belli, and it was second edition when I first started playing, and you could tell it was sort of written in Spanish and then translated to English, and it sort of broke down a little bit. I mean, the gameplay is still very similar.
Bit of lost in translation, sort of.
Yeah, a little bit lost in translation. And then a couple of years ago, they released a third edition, which was actually done properly in English, and the game just ran so much better. And since then, we've seen it pick up. Our local meta's sort of almost doubled in size since the release of third edition. So yeah.
That's amazing. We here have got a pretty decent explosion of Infinity players. We've got 2 groups, one down south side. It's the group who run down through Irresistible Force, one of our sponsors. And then up the top here, we've got a group called the Warrior Lodge. And they've got, between the two, they've probably got about 40 people who play Infinity. So it's really good.
That's pretty decent. Yeah, I mean, we're in here. So I'm from Perth in Western Australia. And we probably get between sort of 16 to 20 to our tournaments, and then we probably got sort of double that of people in the entire meta. So I'd say there's sort of a player base of about 40, and then we get probably 16 sort of regular to pretty much every single tournament, and then maybe a few extras on top of that. So, but certainly on the East Coast, I know. Yeah, Brisbane's got a pretty big scene. Sydney's sort of growing exponentially at the moment, as Sydney does, and Melbourne's pretty much the same. And I was lucky enough to go to CanCon, which is sort of like the national tournament, and a couple of years ago. And I think we had 62 play there, and I think we had about 70 last year. So yeah, no, it's going well.
Amazing. How did you go in CanCon?
Top 10 actually. Yeah, finished sixth off the top of my head. So I finished best in faction, finished sixth, and then the guy that I do the podcast with, and I'll chat about the podcast in a second. He actually took out the major prize this year. So I didn't go to CanCon this year, but he did, and he won CanCon. So great result for the podcast. So yeah, very happy.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Oh man, that's awesome. And you guys, I've had to listen to a fair few of your shows, and you've had some pretty interesting individuals on. You had the head, basically the corpus belli head of what their equivalent of the ITC is.
Yeah, we had Heloise, who manages the ITS part of the game, and I'll talk a bit about that and sort of how that interacts with the community. And we've also had Carlos Bostria, who's sort of the head of gamer relations on. So so basically, I run a podcast called White Noise, an Infinity the Game podcast with a mate of mine, Ben, who's also in WA. And we've been running for about a year, and we started off just doing sort of podcasts between the two of us, talking sort of locally, talking with some people in our local meta, and then we sort of expanded out into sort of more interview styles probably over the last 4 months, chatting with some of the top players from around the world. And let me tell you, it's pretty interesting chatting to, someone who consistently places high in the international rankings, and everything in Infinity does have there's an international ranking, and it's amazing that there's some really smart people out there in the way they approach the game, and just on a complete, as soon as you start talking to them, you realize they're on a completely different level to you. And it's I suppose that's one of the lucky things with a dice game is, even if you play badly, sometimes the dice can save you, can't they? So I rely a bit on that myself.
Oh, that's good. I think we all do. I think we all either curse or thank the dice at some point, whether or not you're writing a handful of little D20s or you're rolling buckets of D6s like I tend to do with my guard army. Usually pretty good.
Yeah, sweet. So do you want me to get straight into it, start talking about the game itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know nothing about Infinity other than it's a fairly small game. By all means, take us away.
Go for it.
Tell me Infinity.
From the beginning.
Yeah. So I'm going to sort of start with a bit of a generic overview about the game, and I'll talk a bit of fluff. I'll talk some game mechanics, and I'll talk about sort of the official sort of Infinity ranking. So basically, Infinity is a skirmish game. So normally see, I think 6 is probably like that's sort of beginner sort of play style. I'm not sure if you ever remember playing. I'm not sure if you played any War Machine or Hordes, but you remember you got those battle boxes, and you play sort of like a 25-point game in the old school Mark II sort of range. But then you realise that once you actually start playing, sort of 50 points was where it's at and stuff like that. So I think it's more realistic. You get between about 10 and sort of 15 miniatures on the table, and some of the Horde style armies. So talking Imperial Guard, from what I remember of my 40k days, they'll sometimes get about 20 miniatures on the field. So yeah, all up, there's only ever going to be sort of maybe 35 max, and that would be a huge game realistically. So so skirmish style, and it's set 175 years in the future. So you've still got all the sort of Earth politics going on, if that makes sense, as far as the storylines go. And so it's basically there's still sort of there's low tech, there's high tech, and there's some weapons that we'd recognise today, and then obviously some weapons that we wouldn't so much recognise going into the future. So the game itself, there's 9 factions, and then there's 19 sub factions, and it's a little difficult to explain, but not too hard. So sub factions are a bit similar to Space Marine chapters, in the sense that you can choose to take a sub faction, and that when you take that sub faction, you get a reduced choice of miniatures from the main range. But there's a few different rule sets that sort of go with it. And you also are able to take a larger number of restricted miniatures. So, for example, in one of the armies, they might say, a heavy infantry Father Knight might be availability 2, so you can take 2 in an army. But if you're taking the military orders army, then you can take sort of 4. So that's sort of one of the bonuses that you get for taking the sub factions.
Right.
So,
Okay,
yeah, go on. Sorry.
so each faction is kind of, it represents a political or a military organization within the Corpus Belli universe, or is it the Infinity universe? Not really.
Yeah, so it's sort of so Corvus Belli is like the maker of the game, so it's the Infinity Universe.
Yeah.
And so it's 175 years into the future. There's been a couple of wormholes. So there's Earth that's been populated, and then there's a couple of other planets sort of nearby that have also been populated as well.
Okay.
So the main factions, and I'll talk about this in the fluff a little bit more, but basically there's 6 human factions representing some of the countries that we know today. There's 2 alien races, or Xenos, as you like to call them in 40K, and one sort of evil robot sort of faction. So so no, there's a fair bit of, and they all play pretty differently as well. So there's a fair bit of opportunity to play your sort of specific play style.
Okay.
Now, one of the nice things about Infinity I find is the balance. So it's a really well balanced game, and it basically does this on a rule of using a points cost and a special weapons cost. So the way to explain that is the generic game of Infinity is 300 points, and so like any other miniatures game, you can take 30 10-point guys, or 100-point guy, and then 20 10-point guys. So you can build up your army from that points. But they also have what they call a special weapons cost. So for every 100 points, you get 2 SWC, or special weapons costs. So in a normal 300-point game, you'll get 6. And that basically, so every unit has a cost, but also has a special weapons cost. So if you're taking something with a I don't want to use the term Death Star, but a very powerful weapon. So, heavy machine guns, sniper rifles. Some of the alien races have these, super high-powered plasma weapons and stuff like that. They have a high SWC cost. So you're restricted to take how many big guns you can take per army.
Okay.
So you can't field these massive units sort of left, right, and center. They're sort of restricted by the SWC, and the more weapons that you take, and so there's some big robots, stompy robots they call tags, with some huge weapons. They'll have a very high SWC, and then it will obviously reduce the amount of other weapons that you can take. So your missile launchers and stuff like that can do a lot of damage. They also have a high SWC cost, so you can't just spam them in your army. And that's one of the ways that they balance the game. And just the last part about the overview is all rules and templates are free online. So really, I know. Yeah.
Wait, whoa! What are you saying?
We don't know that word. What's that word?
What's this?
Yeah. So
free rules.
Free rules. So
and templates.
Template. So basically, every marker, every template you're going to need in the game is printable online. All the rules, including all the models, everything is free, and they've got their own army builder, and I'll show you later on in the
army builder. Would you say it's well made and free?
It's well made and free.
Oh my God, what is this place, a charity?
Yeah.
How do they make any money?
Benevolent body.
I'll talk about how they monetize a bit sort of later on in the cast, but yeah, basically, so you can jump on, you can get the rule book. They've also got an official wiki page, which is sanctioned by the makers of the game. So that's run by someone who's a well-known guy called Ian the War Trader from England, and he's paid by CB to keep the wiki up to date.
What's his name? Ian the War Trader.
War Trader. He runs a local gaming store called the War Trader or something similar to that. And don't quote me on that. So they keep a free wiki page which will reference all the rules. And the wiki's fantastic. There's no ifs, buts, or maybes. I generally use it a couple of times a game quite easily.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Scotty.
Yeah, all the rules are free. You've got to understand though that you won't get any fluff though. So everything online, you'll get some sort of basic fluff. But if you want to read more about the armies and stuff like that, you need to buy the books, which come with the rule book. So so that's sort of a bit of an overview of Infinity.
My God, that sounds amazing. This is so it's a smaller game. Sounds like it goes a little bit quicker.
Yeah, it can do. Sort of like any game, it sort of depends on your opponent. I consider myself a reasonably quick player, and I'll normally smash out a game in less than 90 minutes. But obviously, it depends on how well you know your own army, how well you know the rules, and sort of how the game's going to go. But I find generally for a tournament, they'll give 2 hours per game, and most people should finish within 2 hours.
Wow, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's so quick.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, like I said, I also play a bit of Legion, mate. So that's not as quick, but yeah, that's one of the things.
Quicker than
So-
the game 40k, put it that way.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I haven't played 40k in a long time, so yeah, it's sort of hard to sort of compare it to.
Well, it's not too bad now so we're currently in 8th edition. 7th edition was quite rules heavy. 8th edition has been cut down quite a bit. It's actually quite a bit faster. There's a lot less charts to be doubling out on and having a look at. Pretty much everything. If it's a ballistic skill, it's going to hit on that. If it's the same tough, like weapon strength, the same toughness, it's going to be a 4. Lower, it's going to be 3. If it's double their toughness, it's a 2+. So
2+. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, it's pretty
Nice.
simple system.
I suppose I should also point out that the army builders, they've also built a mobile app for free as well. So so you can sort of do a bit of list building while you're at work, which helps out as well.
I have recently downloaded it. I won't lie. I have been poking around, trying to get a little bit of a head start. Yeah, just looking at it, it's different to use. I'm not gonna lie. Coming from coming from Battlescribe, which is basically the go-to for most tabletop wargamers. This program is actually quite smooth. It's quite it's easy to navigate if you're intuitive about it, but you kind of got to work out. You got to know what units you're looking at.
Yeah, you do, and I suppose that's one of the things about the game is like any miniatures game. Really, there's a bit of a learning curve there. And I'd suggest probably that's one of the downsides of Infinity is it's probably got a bit of a steeper learning curve than maybe some other games. But sort of once you're at it, it's it sort of runs pretty easily. So,
but once, like you said, it's got a steeper learning curve. Is the player base that little bit smaller, so there's not a lot of other people to help you with your rules if you're not understanding, or how does that go?
No, I think there's. I certainly haven't heard of a meta where no one sort of knows what's going on. Certainly, I'd say that in our local meta, we've got roughly sort of 20 people, and of those, I'd suggest at least 5 to 10 would be very confident with the rules. Certainly, chatting to people in the Sydney meta and the Melbourne meta and stuff like that, that'd be similar. I suppose the issue with the game is there's so many special rules. It's a little bit. I used to play a bit of Malifaux and stuff like that. At least with something like Malifaux, all the rules are on the card. So if you haven't got the cards for the other factions, you don't really know what's going to be coming for you. On this, all the rules are consolidated in the rulebook, so you can look them up. They're all available on the wiki. But obviously, until you've sort of played against an army who are using that rule for the first time, then you might not be understanding how it sort of it's it's all well and good to read it, but until you see it on the table, you go, oh, hang on, okay, that's how that works. And now I'm going to die a horrible, horrible death. So,
oh wow, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, do you want me to crack on to sort of where the game's based and a bit of the fluff around it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I am so keen for the fluff. So just quickly before we get into the fluff, I've been reading a lot of Altered Carbon.
Yes. This is Netflix, is it?
Yeah, Altered Carbon and the actual books as well. The actual stories by Morgan K. Richards. It's actually pretty good. How do the two have, like, I've heard that the two have some sort of interaction, some sort of influence?
Listen, as far as I'm aware, they don't. And I'll sort of preface this by saying I'm not huge on the fluff, and I was sort of saying this off air just beforehand. I enjoy the game because I think it's a well-balanced game and it's fun to play. So I've done a bit of research for the fluff, and I'm going to go through it as best as I can. But listen, if anyone picks up anything wrong, hit us up in the comments, and I'll do my best to fix it.
Cool.
Wicked. All right. I can't wait. All right, let's do it. Let's hear some fluff.
All right, so we're 175 years in the future. So rewind sort of, I think it's about 50 to 80 years. We've got a faction called the Ariadnans. So this is the superpowers that we see today, minus China. So we've got the Americans, the Poms, the French, and the Russians, and they've all joined together and built a big sort of starship and sent it off to explore a wormhole. And basically, that ship was never seen again. So it was called the Ariadne. Yeah, so all the best people in America, Britain, France, and Russia have gone off in this ship, and basically hasn't been seen since. And then
got sucked in 40K war. Anyway.
Yeah, quite possibly into the war. But basically, there's a power shift on Earth, and some new factions sort of arise. And so you mentioned Pan-Oceania before. So this is the hyperpower. This is known as probably the strongest, most dominant faction in the Infinity universe. And so it's basically a joining of the Catholic Church along with some Oceanic and South American countries. So we're looking Australia, New Zealand, bit of Indonesia, Brazil, Chile, sort of some of the South American countries, and the Catholic Church. So they've got they've got a military sort of side to things, a military religious order.
Oh,
they play with they play with a bit of religious fervor and stuff like that. And they've got the Pope's guards, the Swiss guards, sort of members of the group. They've got sort of jungle warriors, just like in South America. And they've also got amphibious sort of troops and stuff like that. But basically, they've got a lot of technology. They're sort of very good at what they do, and I'd probably say they're most sort of able to be matched to maybe the Space Marines.
Yeah, cool.
They're the army that are probably the most prevalent, I think, in Infinity.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. So they're a pretty big faction.
Yeah, pretty big faction. Matched quite easily by Yuqing. So this is the Asian faction. So this is China, Korea's, and up until recently Japan. And I'll talk about that sort of a little bit later. So once again, very, very good at sort of matching the hyperpower. A lot of heavy infantry. They've got the invincible warriors. They've got a lot of sort of they play with a very sort of Chinese style sort of theme. They've got prisoners that will blow themselves up or will get blown up if they don't go forward and stuff like that. So so Yijing, a lot of they had ninjas, they had a few other things, and celestial guards, and a very sort of Asian themed army.
Yeah, cool.
You got the Haq Islam faction, which is an Islamic faction.
Oh, nice.
They don't care in Spain about being politically correct or anything like that. But no, so basically it's an Islamist faction. These are the best sort of doctors in the game.
Nice.
So they practice sort of Islamic sort of medicine. They get bonus to their doctor roles and stuff along these sort of lines. Not the biggest faction going around, but they've also got what they call the assassins. So you've got those sort of stealthy assassins from the Middle East have got their sort of own faction within the Haq Islamic faction.
Nice.
Yeah, so there's been a bit of a power shift, and basically the world's learned how to control wormholes, and everyone's traveled into space. And when they've gone into space, everyone started populating some worlds. So Pan-Oceania is the biggest, has populated the most. Yuqing the next, and then basically Haq Islam's got one world, I think, off the top of my head. And then basically there's a few worlds that are sort of in contention that everyone's sort of fighting over.
Okay.
So so Pan-O are sort of the big players there. And then it's sort of funny. So they've created an organization called the O12, which is similar to the UN. and it's quite funny because it's got about as much clout as our current UN has, which is basically none.
It's got no authority.
No
Which is-
authority at all. Everyone's still dying out for an O12 faction. O12 aren't a faction; they're not a playable faction.
Okay.
And basically, most of the weapons that are used in game are banned by O12. So this is why everyone thinks that maybe there'll be an O12 faction in the future, because they always talk about, they'll give a weapon loadout and they'll say this weapon's actually banned by O12 for whatever reason. You go, okay, well, it's good. Hopefully, it's there for a reason. And yeah, so basically, once everyone's sort of living in there's peace in the world, but there's a lot of sort of special operations going on, especially between Pano and Yuqing and a few of the other factions. And there's a lot of sort of special operations going on, and this is where Infinity's set. It's not meant to be an all-out war between factions. It's meant to be special operations, clandestine, which is why it's sort of skirmish game.
Sneaky between
cool.
between each other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
right.
why the games are always. That's why they're quite small. Well, that's why you've got quite small factions.
Yeah, and they've actually clarified this recently. They said that this is what it's. While there is on some planets an all-out war going on, that is not what Infinity is about. Infinity is a clandestine action between two sort of sides. So yeah, so basically they've created a galaxy-wide computer system called Aleph. And Aleph's actually sentient, and it controls the O12 security force, and it controls basically like internet now. You can plug into the Maya net, as they call it, and so basically the security forces that are run throughout the galaxy and all the police forces is run by Aleph, but Aleph's actually sentient. And it's gone bad, and not everyone knows this yet. But so Aleph is a playable faction. So all the models in Aleph are sort of robots, and sort of the world's progressed to the point where everyone has these things called cubes. So cubes can be planted; they retain someone's identity, and they can be planted in a host body, and then someone can live to fight again. So this is how This is how they keep people alive that may have died in the game. So some of the characters and the generals, they've all got cubes. So as long as their cube can be recovered, a little bit like the gene seed, if I remember my 40k lore correctly, they can quite easily put it in a new body.
Okay, so for those of you who are Altered Carbon fans, that's really similar to the stack system that they use, which is where someone must have steered me. They're like, oh yeah, Infinity's like Altered Carbon, and so I see now. So they've got. So does everyone have a cube?
No, not everyone has a cube. So you basically have to be a pretty good warrior. Even though the line troopers in most of the main factions have got cubes, the law states you've got to be one of the better sort of warriors to have your sort of your memories retained in a cube. But no, certainly not all of them do. And yeah, so Aleph, which is the security force, has a whole bunch of blank bodies which they can use to fill with anyone they want. And actually, they've started recreating characters out of legend and myth. So you've got Joan of Arc and Achilles and Ajax the Great, and basically someone's created these personas for these mythological heroes and put them into a body as to how they would be. So we see a bit of so you can see some sort of Greek heroes on the table and stuff like that as well, and they sort of fight with that sort of same thematic. So so that's sort of where the world's at. And then basically what's happened is in the game, the ship that was sent, the Ariadne ship is located, and they've populated a planet, and this planet was filled with sort of like werewolves and stuff like this, who have mated like with some of the humans. So you got these dog warriors and stuff like this.
Of course. But
the problem is this world that they populated was they're very low tech. So they went off to explore. They crash landed on this hellhole of a world. They haven't had a chance to develop like the rest of the world. And so Ariadne is now what was USA, Britain, France, and Russia are now very low tech. So a lot of cowboys with bows and arrows and stuff like this, and the all the tools available. So these are the horde factions. So a lot of cheap troops. You know, they've got a lot of Scots. There's a Scottish sort of style faction, which
Nice.
yeah, like very cheap, and they run sort of lots and lots of orders. But yeah, so a lot of the Ariadnan troops don't have cubes, which can affect them in game, and sort of I'll sort of come back to that with the game mechanics.
Okay.
But they do have some cool troopers, and they do have some big werewolf sort of guys that can turn into werewolves and stuff like that. And then one of the other factions is the Nomads. So the Nomads are a group of sort of hackers that aren't beholden to anyone. They've got 3 big ships that wander the galaxy, and basically they work for anyone, for anything. They work for money. They're not plugged into Aleph, and they're not plugged into Marnet, which is why Aleph is trying to destroy the Nomad Nation, because it wants everyone to be plugged into it. Sort of a little bit like Skynet from the old T2 days sort of thing.
I love that. That's so good.
So yeah, so the Nomads are sort of off grid, but they're known as the best hackers in the game. So they got the best hacking devices, they got the best ability to hack, and they sort of get involved with the skirmishes, and there's 3 sort of Nomad sub factions, and that represents each of the 3 ships that wander the galaxy. So that's
wicked.
So that sort of covered off all the human factions. So just going over them again. So you got the Ariadnans, which represent sort of the superpowers of the world today, who are now sort of the low-tech guys. So Ariadna, Pan-Oceania, which is basically the Catholic Church, and Australia and South America. Yuqing, which is the Chinese, Haq Islam, and I think, and the Nomad Nation. So so they're the human factions. You got Aleph, which is the evil robot faction. I'm just making sure I haven't missed anyone. I haven't. And then we basically come from there to the aliens. So in game, our galaxy's been invaded, and it's been invaded by the Combined Army, who basically they have sort of a genetic hive mind, very sort of Tyrannid style, if I could sort of go sort of that way, and they're basically on a quest to sort of control the galaxy. And then on top of that, so the Combined Army have got sort of like a Planet of the Apes style sort of assault force, which are called the Morats, and they've also got some, a very sneaky sort of force, and they've got a very high tech force. So basically, combined are a very versatile army. If you're going to play with them, there's a lot of different play styles that you can go there. You've also got the Tohar, who have been fighting the Combined Army for a long time. They've sort of followed them into our galaxy, and they're trying to motivate the humans to fight the Combined Army off. But they've got their own ulterior motives as well. So
as you do.
Yeah. So Tohar are the other sort of alien faction from there. Okay. So they're the sort of the main factions in the game. And then recently, the stories progress. So basically, every year the story progresses. And there's a couple of non-aligned factions at the moment. So we've got the Japanese. So the Japanese have actually been part of Infinity for a long period of time, but they used to be aligned with Yuqing. They've recently had a rebellion, and now they fight for themselves. So they're part of what they call a non-aligned faction. And then there's 3 mercenary companies also that are also non-aligned as well. So you've got the Druze, the Ikari, and the Starko. So you can choose depending on your play style. There's basically a way that, if you want to be an alpha striker, there's an army for that. If you want to be a turtler, there's an army for that. If you want to run horde armies, you can do that. Sorry, excuse me.
You're good, man.
Yeah, so yeah, it's certainly a few different sort of ways to play. And then with the story progresses every year. So every year they have a worldwide championships in Spain at CB headquarters. And at the end of the tournament, the new season starts, and the story progresses with each new season. And then each year there's also a worldwide campaign run in conjunction with Beasts of War, which I'm sure most of you guys probably be aware of. Beasts of War, which is a site run mainly from England off the top of my head. And that's basically about to drop in a week, and the story progresses from there as well. So they're always sort of pushing the story forward.
So it's not the tournament, or when they go to CB headquarters, it's not that drives the narrative for the year. It's the other part. Is that what you're saying?
The campaign.
The camp.
No, it's not. Basically, that's just sort of signals the end of the season. So the big tournament at the end doesn't actually really affect sort of what happens story wise, but they release the next set of season's rules after the end of that tournament. So that affects the story, and then the worldwide campaign will also affect the story, depending as people submit battle reports, and then they'll change the story based on sort of how that goes.
Cool.
Man, that is awesome. That is a phenomenal amount of support from Corpus Belly.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good. Like I said, I'm sure I've missed some huge amounts of fluff there, and like I said, I'm not a huge fluff person, but that's basically a sort of a generic overview of the troops and the way that the game's played.
It's all good. We can always drag you back to pick your brains more.
yeah, no problems at all. So you guys want to hear about some game mechanics?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got some questions about the fluff. So you said the Japanese they've been part of the Yujing faction, but now they're not. So are they under a certain name now? Are they
No, so they're the Japanese Successionist Army now.
Okay,
so they used to be the Japanese Sectorial Army, and they've rebelled and basically So Yuqing lost all the Japanese units, bar one or two, and then the Japanese now have got some new units to form their own army, and so there was a lot of sort of story narrative driven events, and they bring out new missions to represent these events. So people can play as the Yujing or they can play as Japanese in these fighting these rearguard sort of actions.
Wicked. Now, so I've got one of my mates, he's messaging me, and it's basically along the lines of the Toa are rubbish. I don't like them. Insert more expletives here, please.
Yeah, there's a lot of hate for Toha.
Yeah, there seems to be a bit of hate for this this alien faction. Is there?
Yeah, Toha. People call them #broken Toha. They've got a few game mechanics that work well for them. We've discussed this on our podcast at length, and I've sort of made the point that they don't win every major tournament. If they did, then I'd say they're broken. But the fact they don't suggests that there's no sort of they're not overpowered. But no, they've got some real infuriating mechanics. Is probably the easiest way to describe it. And a lot of people call them #broken Toha. So there's a fair bit of hate for them out there.
Are they a new faction?
They're one of the newer factions. They've been around for at least sort of they were sort of in the second edition, and so I mean we're going back sort of at least sort of 4 years. I'd say they've been in the game, so they've been around for a while now.
Okay. So it's not like a meta thing where people are kind of like just adjusting to new mechanics.
No, it's not. It's funny. They did change up some mechanics with the release of Human Sphere, which was a further sort of rule book which came out maybe about 18 months ago off the top of my head. And so they've got an ability where they can basically, if you manage to hit them, they can ignore all the hits from the first attack.
Oh wow!
So for a defensive sort of team, if they're winning those what we call face-to-face rolls, it can be very difficult to sort of dislodge them and then go and do what you need to do. But they've got their own. They struggle with their own things as well. So yeah, it's basically
not as bad as people make out.
No, I don't think it's as bad as people make out. But there's a lot of people that whinge about them. There's no doubt about that.
Whinges in every game. Really
correct.
Correct. We got a few in the chat. Who are definitely having a bit of a complaint about Toa at the moment. So
yeah,
I'm guessing there's a bit of a hurt there.
Yeah,
but yeah, man, that sounds interesting. Okay, so before we jump into the rules, and the game mechanics of Infinity, two of the big differences that I noticed is that firstly, you guys, it's 3 turns. And secondly, you guys use D20s.
Yeah, it is. So it is a D20. So this is sort of part of the game mechanics. So, and what infuriates me is the way that you make armor rolls with the D20s. But basically, every other roll, you have a number that you need, and then you have to roll equal to or under that. So if I need a 14, I need to roll a 14 or less. And then it's reversed with armor rolls. So armor rolls, if I get hit with a damage 14 weapon and I've got 0 armor, then I've got to roll over that. So I've got to roll a 15 or more. So it can be a little confusing for new players. It's like, am I trying to roll over or under? But basically, yeah, so it uses D20s. And yeah, so basically every game is 3 turns, but it can be less than that depending on how the games run.
Okay.
So yeah, so I mean, I'm going to talk about a bit more about this when I talk about the ITS, but
absolutely,
there's a lot of official sort of missions, and one of the things you can do is put an army into retreat, which sounds like a good thing, but it's actually not a great thing sometimes. And basically, if you put your opponent into retreat, the game ends immediately after the next turn. So so basically, you can have a monster first turn. And the game will be over sort of after your opponent has their next turn. So so it can be less than 3 turns.
Unlike 40k, tabling your opponent isn't ideal.
Isn't ideal, yeah.
Yeah, no, it really depends on the mission, but I can speak for myself when I played a tournament probably about 6 to 8 weeks ago, and I was on top table on the last game of the day, and my opponent pretty much tabled me in his first turn.
Cool.
And because the game finished straight away, he didn't get to do the objectives that he needed to do.
Of course.
And he got a minor victory, which means it's less. And I actually ended up winning the tournament based because I'd had 3 majors, or a couple of major victories before that. So, yeah, so it's not always a good thing tabling your opponent.
Wow. All right. Run us through the mechanics. This sounds interesting.
Cool. So basically, it's a 25 mil game. So all your troopers are 25 mil bases. You got sort of medium-sized troopers, which are on 40 mil bases, and then your larger models. So your tags, which are probably similar to sort of dreadnoughts. They're on sort of 55 mil bases. Sorry, I think my daughter just woke up. Just give me 2 secs, guys. Is that all right?
By all means, me and Scotty can have a quick chat. We'll do a bit of a quick rundown as to where we're at the moment. So those of you who are joining us at the moment, we are currently talking to Marty from the White Noise podcast, and he is giving us a crash course on Infinity.
Absolutely.
So far, we learnt it has much better player support than Games Workshop.
It has free rules.
The rules are free. Holy shit. And they have a functional army builder application that is free and easy to use. So there you go.
Well, and hasn't caused all the butthurt. And yes,
our minds so far are absolutely blown just in regards to how it is. I don't think Scotty's played a game of Infinity yet. I've played one game and watched a few games, and so it's all coming together. All the pieces are coming together. So very exciting. So Marty's back, and he's going to be running us through mechanics of Infinity.
Yeah, I am. Sorry about that, guys. I think it was a cat jumping the roof, actually. So,
don't apologize, man. It's all good.
Didn't want the door to walk out. So basically, the bigger models are sort of, I'd sort of say, are probably most similar to a sort of dreadnought style. So some of the tags are sort of piloted with humans inside them, and they run on a 55 mil base. So there's a bit of sort of a size difference. Now, one of the things with the game mechanics is each model has what they call a silhouette value. So it runs from silhouette 1 to silhouette 8 off the top of my head. And basically this allows them to give them a dynamic pose. So an example of that is most troopers are what they call silhouette 2, and they'll give you, and it's printable online, as I said, all the markers and all the rules are free online. They'll give you
more free stuff.
Yeah, they'll give you a sort of a rectangular marker which shows the exact size of a silhouette 2 model. So while my sniper on the 25 mil base is actually lying prone, it's actually represented by a standard size marker. So we've got acrylic markers that we use, you can get from third-party sort of suppliers and stuff like that. So if you're ever checking line of sight or something like that, you actually put down the silhouette marker as opposed, so you can still run your your good-looking sniper who's lying prone. But then if you need to check line of sight, then you actually put down the acrylic marker. And so there's a standard size model for all troops. So that allows them to sort of muck around with the poses and have guys that are sort of floating in the air and stuff like that. But they're actually, when you're checking line of sight, when you're checking cover and stuff like that, everything's standard.
Which is
That's
amazing because
cool.
you don't have to model your miniatures for a tournament. You can just have them the amazing sculpts that is, and so you can just say like, my sniper, here he is, he's standing up on some like amazing rock formation that I've built from scratch. He looks absolute baller, but he's actually prone.
Yeah, no problems at all. So so a lot of people.
How do you indicate that? Is there like
so there's a marker. There's a marker for that indicates whether a model's prone. So you basically just when you set it up, you put the prone marker next to it and say he's actually the size of his base. So if a marker's prone, it's the size of the base, and then if it's standing up, it's the size of the silhouette. So
nice.
Everything's sort of standard. So it means that if you want to do your conversions and stuff like that, it's not going to muck up your line of sight or anything along those sort of lines.
Brilliant! Wow.
Yeah,
pretty much easier.
So so about 10 to 20 models per side. I normally rock with Pan-Oceania is one of the more elite armies. So I'll probably rock normally about 13 models is probably my sweet spot that I have the most success with. And then from there, you split the models into combat groups. So there's a maximum of 10 models per group. And basically every model provides an order to the group. And basically they push their order into the group, and then you can spend that resource throughout the rest of the group. So for example, I have a big stompy robot. I have 9 other models in its group. So making 10, I can spend all 10 orders on that big stompy robot to go and use his big guns to go and do his stuff, or I can split that resource between the rest of the combat group. So I can move the sniper into a better position. I can move the guy with the flamethrower to cover a flank. So it is, in that sense, a bit of a resource game as well. So you're going to be thinking about your orders. You're going to be thinking about how you're going to split it up between the groups. And you have sort of airborne troops as well, which make up part of your groups. And if they're off the table, they don't put their order into the group until they're on the table. And guys that have sort of like heavy camouflage who can deploy in hidden deployment. So one of the nice things about Infinity is they have what's called a model with total camouflage, where when you're deploying, you ask your opponent to turn their back, you put the model on the table, you take a photograph of where it is, and you take it off the table. So your opponent is going to know there's someone out there, but not actually know where. But,
oh, wow.
But how you pay for that is you don't get that order from that model until it's revealed. So,
of course.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so the orders are split into 2 parts. So they're known as short skills. So you can either do 2 short skills with an order, or you can do 1 long skill. So probably the most common short skills are move, and the next sort of short skill would be a shoot, or it might be a dodge, or it might be an attack action with close combat. It might be a hacking attack, and then long skills are sort of more difficult skills. So speculative fire, intuitive attacks, cautious movement. So trying to move out of line of sight and staying out of line of sight when you activate. So orders are split into normally 2 short skills. So you declare your first short skill, you wait for AROs, which I'll cover in a second, and then you declare your second short skill. So basically the catch cry of Infinity is it's always your turn. And the reason they sort of say this is whenever you activate a model, anyone who's got line of sight to it can what they call ARO. So this is what they call an automatic reaction order. So even if it's your opponent's turn, you need to be looking at what they're doing so you can ARO. So for example, if you activate a model and it's in line of sight of 5 other models, each of my 5 models can shoot at your model. So this is why you need to be careful about your facings, your line of sight, and all this sort of stuff. And then basically you'll declare what your first short skill is going to be. So it's normally something like a move. And then I'll declare what I'm going to do. Am I going to dodge? Am I going to shoot? And as the player in the reactive turn, I don't know what you're going to do as your second order. So are you going to shoot at me, or are you going to try and move forward? If you're a better shot than me, do I want to be trying to shoot you, or do I want to be dodging? So there's a lot of sort of mind games going on with how you use your short skills. And so basically you're always rolling dice, even if it's not your turn, and you're always looking and you're always playing the game, even if it's not your turn. So I remember playing a fair bit of, War Machine and stuff like that. If it's your opponent's turn, all you do is sit there and roll sort of damage charts and stuff like that. There's not a lot of play going on, where in Infinity there's a lot of play going on, even in your active turn.
In 40k you can be like, all right, mate, it's your movement phase. I'm gonna go have a beer. I'm gonna go
take the tube and sit on for 20 minutes and see you later.
Yeah, and when I'm back, we'll just sort it out. But this sounds like it's a lot more fluid. So when you're saying you've got to be constantly watching your opponent to see what they're doing, is there a certain amount of time that you can react? So like, let's say they move something in front of it. Is it like a courtesy thing? There's like, well, I've moved this guy. Is there anything you want to do?
Yeah, so you normally clear it. So you declare your first short skill, and as the active player, say any arrows, and it's friendly game. Obviously, you'd point it out to your opponent. Tournament setting, you sort of say, what's he gonna like? Friendly game, what's he gonna do? What about this guy? And it's quite often, especially you've got guys hidden in buildings, you might actually forget about them legitimately. So it's always the courtesy thing for the active player. First short skill, any arrows, and then it's basically up to the reactive player to say, this guy's going to do this, or this one's going to do this. And the other thing is, you've got to give your reactive player a chance to declare something from someone who's hidden. So if they're hidden on the table, you can't just go through and say, there's no one here, so I'm just going to move, because he might want to pop this guy out of hidden deployment and try and snipe you to the back of the head or something along those sort of lines. So,
nice.
But it's actually quite fluid the way it plays. Just because the other person's involved doesn't mean it takes a long time.
Wow, that's very different. Very different.
Yeah. So the game uses what we call a modified D20 rule set. So each model has a base target number, which I've mentioned earlier. You've got to roll equal to or less than to succeed. So a quick example would be they have what they call ballistic skills. So a standard line trooper in Pan Oceania has a ballistic skill of 12.
Did you want to screen share for this? I know what you had.
Yeah, I can. I was going to bring up the army builder later, but I'll screen share.
We can do it. We can.
Where are we? So I'll just bring this up.
I'll just lock on. To everyone.
Just share.
Here we go.
All right, there we go. So if you can see what I'm seeing.
Yeah. So this is the Army Builder Online.
This is the Army Builder Online app. So this is all free. You can find it at army.infinitythegame.com.
I love that.
Damn, that's amazing.
Yeah. So just I'll sort of take you through a little bit now. So here we've got all the major factions. So we've got Pano, Yuching, Ariadna, Hakaslam, Nomads combined, Aleph, Tohar, and the non-aligned armies. And then as you click on them, you can see the sub-factions that are available within that faction. So some have got sort of more than others. You can see poor old Yuching recently lost. They used to have the JSA there, or the Japanese, but they've recently lost them. But they'll be getting the Invincible Army sort of later this year. So they're okay. So just looking at these are what we call a basic trooper for Pan Oceania. They're the Fusiliers. So we've got a move value here first, and you can see the move there is 4/4. So that represents your two short skills. So if the Fusiliers we're going to move,
or centimeters? Sorry, is this inches or centimeters?
So this is in inches. So you can change it to centimeters in the app if that's what you want to use.
What?
Oh, look at that.
So, but it's I suppose a bit of a hangover from most other war games that
for sure.
in Australia we pretty much use inches.
Yep.
But if your opponent wants to use centimeters, there's rules for that as well. So no issue with that either. So so we start off with the move value. So that represents the two short skills. So if your guy was going to move and not do any attacking or anything like that, he can move a total of 8 inches. So his first move is 4 and his second move is 4. And so if you get sort of like a bigger robot They can move sort of a fair bit quicker. I'll just see if I can find something like a Squalo. So they've got a 6-4 move. And then some of the robots, a few guards, I think a 6-6 off the top of my head. There you go.
Oh, wow.
So they can really sort of zoom across the board. Close combat. So that represents their sort of skills. So 13's pretty poor in the game. Ballistic skill. And so this is where I'll talk about sort of the target numbers. So the good old Fusey has a target number of 12. That can be modified by range of your weapon. It can be modified by your opponent being in cover. It can be modified by your opponent having camouflage. But basically, whatever the number ends up as, you need to roll equal to or less than. So yeah, so they got about a base 60% chance of hitting what they're going to hit. Next, we got their physical. So this represents how well they dodge and how well they throw grenades. Willpower is represents things along the lines of sort of how well that they're good at sort of resisting certain sort of hacking attacks and how good they are as hackers.
Okay.
Armor value, biological shield value. So this is for stuff like hacking. This is for stuff like viral ammunition, plasma ammunition.
Yeah, for sure.
All affected by that. Wound, and then your silhouette value. So that shows, that's your silhouette too. And then here it says AVA. It says how many troops you can take as part of your army. So this will change on the sectorials or like the minor factions within the faction, but for the basic ones, the fuses, you can take as many as you want. Okay. Over this side, we can see what type of order they present to the pool. So this is just a regular order. So some units, I'm just trying to think of the MUA. No, it doesn't. Oh, the Warcore. So we can see over here, the Warcore has an irregular order. So that means other models within the combat group can't use his order. So he can only use it on himself.
On himself, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then this over here shows that he's got a cube as well.
Oh,
and then,
okay.
So that's sort of the stat line for the game. And then we can sort of see sort of the loadouts that are available for the Fusiliers here.
Yeah, it's all listed there. You don't get like a standard model and then like kind of add to it. They're all listed on the thing. So you got a paramedic.
Yeah, so I got the paramedic. So this shows you the cost value, which is under C. So in points, and then you have what I was referring to before, your special weapons cost. So if you want to take a missile launcher, a sniper rifle, or a hacking device, it's going to cost you SWC, a light grenade launcher or a heavy machine gun.
Okay.
So that obviously limits the amount of big weapons that you can take. Sort of.
Can't just stack the big weapons, or if you do, you don't. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can take less. So I mean, you can look at this. So a standard Fusilier is 10 points. If we take one of the bigger sort of robots. So he's coming in at 2.5 SWC and 94 points. Cutter's even bigger, I think. So here we've got a Cutter Lieutenant. Wow. So he's coming in at half your SWC for your army is just in this one robot. He's 115 points. So he's more than a third of the value of your normal cost, and he's half your SWC. But because if you take him as your lieutenant, basically the lieutenant in the game gets their own special order that they can use for themselves. So basically, this robot gets an extra order that he gets to use as well. So and
this is one of those big robots. This is one of those tags.
Yeah. So this is one of the tags. So we can see the sort of type here, and this little icon here shows that it's hackable as well. So you can look through the units and say, do I want to take someone who's hackable, or going back to the poor old Fusey, it disappears because they're not hackable.
Okay, because they're just a person. So I'm noticing, so they've got like a whole bunch of weapon options. So in the game, like this is probably something you might cover off later. But if does the infinity range include all the models? So if you wanted to take a Fusilier with a missile launcher?
No, they don't. They don't. So part of the official rules is you can proxy it with another model from CB. They've got most of the models realistically, but there's certainly. I'm just trying to think of one that springs to mind. So the poor old Locust, he went without a model for about a good 6 or 7 years, and they've got one now with the Breaker Combi off the top of my head, but they don't have the assault hacking device Locust. They don't have the marksman rifle Locust or anything like that. But you can proxy it with another model.
I'm going to say that's a good opportunity to try and kit bash from other things as well, potentially. Is that, yeah?
Yeah, is that a thing?
Yeah. Listen, in our meta, we don't see a lot of people doing sort of conversions or anything like that. But I think the official rules say as long as the base of the model is CB, they don't care. Yeah. And like I said, the rules say if you want to proxy something, just tell your opponent. So, yeah.
Okay.
Nice. Pretty loose and fast. I like it.
Yeah. So I'll come back to the army builder a little bit later. I'll just get back to my notes so I know what I'm talking about.
Stop presenting.
Yeah. So the game uses what they call face-to-face rolls. So basically, if we're rolling dice against each other, there's normally only going to be one winner, and so the face-to-face roll determines who's going to win in a shootout. So both players roll dice, and whoever has the highest number then succeeds. So the way that works though is, and before I go into that, so critical hits are when you roll the exact number you need, and that will auto succeed even if it's lower than an opponent. So that means if you have a big stompy robot coming out of a surprise shot coming out of hidden deployment at its good range, and you need a 1 to hit him, and you roll the 1, that's going to succeed no matter what he rolls. If he's needing 18s or 19s or something like that, and he's rolling these huge numbers, even the smallest trooper can take down the biggest guy with that 5% sort of chance of hitting that target number.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's brilliant.
And it happens. It happens all the time. So, So the crit mechanics and sort of, even if you find yourself sort of being outplayed completely, if you can get a critical hit, which will happen sort of 5% of the time, then you'll still succeed and you can take down some big guys.
Is that sort of stuff, has it been pivotal in changing games? Like you'll have one dude just shoot that one thing and then that's just thrown the whole game?
100% happens many times at a tournament. You'll have this one shot that will change the whole game. But I mean that's why you've got to sort of play for that. And so most people go into a tournament saying, right, if this guy goes down, what's my plan B going to be? And me personally, I'll normally have about going to a game with three sort of 2 backup plans. So if someone goes down to a crit, I've got another chance to go and do something. But the rule set will still actually favour the active player, depending on what weapon they're using. And the reason they do that is if you're shooting in ARO, you generally only get 1 dice. There's a few sort of rules that can change that, but generally speaking, I'll get 1 shot back. So even if I'm rolling a high burst value, so your burst value represents the amount of dice that you roll for the weapon, in your reactive turn, it's only ever 1.
Okay.
So if I'm rolling a high burst value weapon against someone, even though they're sort of rolling against me and they might have a better number than me, so they might be looking for a 15. So they're rolling a D20, they're looking for 1 dice on a 15 or less, and I'm rolling 5 dice on a 12 or less. I still think I'd back myself in there, if you know what I mean, because I think there's a good chance I'm going to roll a better number than him. But, it could still, to be honest, I probably wouldn't take that roll. I'd find something else to do the job for me. But the rule set will favour the active player because they get to roll more dice. And that's why you don't want to have too many troops exposed to ARO, because if you've got 5 troops that can see you when you activate, you could potentially having 5 dice coming in at you. And if you've only got a weapon that has a burst of 3, you can only split that between sort of 3 of them. And that means at least 2 of them are going to get what they call unopposed rolls, where they get to roll for free against you. So, you need to be careful about how you play.
Oh, wow. It's technical. So it's a lot of deployment, a lot of, trying to, a lot of, you mentioned you can hide your models. You can.
So laser sights are a huge tool, more so Infinity than most other games I've played. And everyone's pretty good about it. They just say, based on maths, I should be able to see this guy before this guy, so I'm going to move him out so I can just see one at a time.
Yep.
Most people don't have an issue with that. But this is sort of one of the downsides of Infinity, as far as the game mechanics go, is you do need large amounts of terrain.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Infinity's got some beautiful terrain. There's some beautiful tables.
Doesn't it just? doesn't it?
But
Just
you rock up to a tournament, and I've got a bootload full of terrain just to make one table. And if we're having 20 people play, then we need to fill 10 tables worth of terrain on a 4x4. So,
Oh, so it's not a 6x4. With
no, 4x4,
and it's a
Nice.
4 table.
Yeah, sorry, it's a 4 foot by 4 foot table. And so basically, and you probably want to fill it with terrain to the point where there's only a couple of sort of, so there's a standard size sort of blast template is where you could drop airborne troopers, and you probably only want maybe a space for maybe 3 or 4 of them across your entire table. Apart from that, you want a lot of scattered terrain so you can move from cover to cover as you go up the board. You don't want vast open space, otherwise everyone's just going to be dead by the end of turn 1, basically.
Huh. So shameless plug incoming. A good example of some of the amazing boards that are perfect for Infinity are available at Irresistible Force down in Tanamera. One of our main sponsors. They produce amazing tables with the very talented Josh on his airbrush, and they absolutely smashed out. And most of the stuff that they use is from Miniature Scenery, and there's a couple of other very specific Infinity terrain makers. I, in fact, have a few pieces here myself, and they're all going to come down for sure.
Wreck that hole. No, he's not all good.
So good. So
Yeah.
these ones just here, these are all MDF terrain. You guys, I'm assuming you guys use like the MDF flat pack sort of terrain as well.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Miniature Scenery. I've got some myself,
Oh,
so I'm just
love
having a
it.
look at what you got. I've probably got 1 or 2 of those that you've got going on there. So yeah.
I got the Beanie Mechanic. I got the garage because I'm just like, oh, I can't go past that. That's brilliant.
Yes,
Absolutely
no, I've
love
got the
it.
garage. Yep.
And got the distribution center and the administration block. So I'm looking forward to building these and painting these up. You guys can look forward to very confusing and interesting tutorial in the future for everyone who's watching.
Yeah, so this is where your friendly local game store really comes in handy. If you have a good game store, as it sounds like Irresistible Force is in Brizzy,
Love it.
then you can rock up and play some games. But apart from that, you need I've got a huge, basically 2 tubs worth of scenery that I used to make 1 board. So
Absolutely. Wow, that's insane.
it is. I think it's a bit of a negative as someone who's not a hobbyist. But
Yeah, for sure.
if you're going to play a game, you really need a full 4x4s tables worth of terrain, and you want to set it up so it's asymmetric. So you don't want it sort of similar on both sides. You want terrain to favour one side, because at the start of the game you have a deployment roll or initiative. You have a roll off, and whoever wins get to choose whether or not they're going to choose which table edge, or whether or not they're going to go first turn and go for the alpha strike. So
Yeah,
you really
nice.
want to make it a decision. You really want to favour. You don't want to say, well, I'll definitely take first turn because the scenery is exactly the same. You want to say this side is definitely better than the other side, either because it's got a sniper post, or it's just got the better cover, or it's got better movement to the objectives, as opposed to, well, they're both about the same, so I might as well go first. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that sounds like terrain is a big feature to it. Our local group who plays Northside here, the Warrior Lodge, they recently had to re-gear a lot of their terrain. So they had obviously the 40k and Age of Sigmar tables, which Age of Sigmar, you only need maybe 5 medium-sized to small-sized pieces of terrain on a 6x4 to basically the equivalent of, maybe like 4 or 5 tables worth of terrain in a 4x4 area.
Yeah.
So they've regeared that, and they've actually done a really fantastic job. And I didn't know about the whole, it had to, like, they weren't supposed to be symmetrical.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
It makes so much sense because you want to have that advantage. You want that role and
Decent tactical decision whether to go first or pick.
Yeah, correct. You want to have that choice. That's what it comes down to. You don't want it
straight away from the get-go before you even start placing models. You're thinking on your feet straight away.
Yeah. So so that's sort of something that maybe the newer players sort of fall into a little bit, is sort of making a symmetrical table when it says in the rule book, make an asymmetrical table, make it a choice between, do I want the better side or do I want first turn?
I wonder if that's something you can like how to make an asymmetrical table for everyone who gets stuck in the habit of 40k. How to induce chaos.
Yeah,
Take
no,
my whole
there's
table and just combine it all into 4x4 and we'd be all good.
So as far as sort of the game it goes, self goes, so there's obviously shooting. And I'll talk about some of the weapons and stuff like that when I look at the army builder in a bit more sort of detail. There's close combat, so even in the 175 years in the future, a sword to the face is still pretty lethal. You have hacking, so all the big robots and all the heavy infantry and all the hackers, they can all hack each other. So that's sort of a lot of fun, but you obviously need to be reasonably close to be able to do that, or you got to have a repeater, which sort of extends your hacking area out. There's a lot of sort of smoke and stuff like that. But I suppose the biggest issue with Infinity is it's got a pretty high learning curve. So there's a lot of special skills in the game, and an example of this is sort of airborne deployment. I think there's 5 levels of airborne deployment depending on whether or not you have a low-tech parachutist who at the start of the game you have to write down where they're going to walk in off the side of the board, to a high-tech guy with jetpacks who can land basically anywhere or come in from the rear from your opponent's deployment zone and stuff like that. So there's a lot of special skills that sort of interact in the game, and they're all free online. They're all free in the rule book. But like I said, until you've sort of experienced them on the table, it can be pretty frustrating for a new player to have, you basically just get murdered until you sort of understand how those special skills sort of work. That's
really interesting. So I noticed on some of the, like, I was flicking through the army builder, like you could have martial arts level 2. I'm like, oh, okay, that's weird. Why wouldn't they just call it? Because that's different to 40k. 40k, our special rules are very, if it has a special rule, and they'll be pretty similar across the system. They try to make it different for other stuff, but like a jetpack is a jetpack and it does exactly what every other jetpack does. But you're saying that there are different levels of jetpack in Infinity.
No, so all the equipment is the same. So a combi rifle is the same across a rifle's the same across all armies and stuff like that. But the way that you can use those jetpacks actually changes depending on the skill of the user. So so martial arts is another good one. I think there's 5 levels of martial arts or 6 levels of martial arts, and then there's some sort of sub levels, sort of which are like berserk and stuff like this. So, and then they also provide other special skills. So if you've got martial arts, you also get granted stealth. So if you're moving out of line of sight of someone, then they can't. So normally you can ARO even out of line of sight if someone activates in your zone of control, so an 8-inch sort of radius of you. But if you have stealth or you have martial arts, then you don't get to ARO until they actually do something against you or something along those sort of lines. So, and then the martial arts depend on, if you're in close combat, they can increase your target number. So some of the huge guys that are good at sort of smashing face up close, they might have a close combat skill of 30. So that means they're adding 10 to any roll. So they're critting on a 10. But then you can take your martial arts value and add 6 to it or add 3 to it. So now they're 33. So you're adding 13 to any roll. So you're almost guaranteed a crit, basically.
Wicked.
Or you can negative someone else's target number. So the poor old Fusilier, he's getting attacked he's getting surprised attack out of camouflage, which gives him a -6. Martial arts might give him another -6 on top of that. So he can't actually do anything at all. So so
just cops it all to the face, and
he does cop it all to the face, sort of porno style. But
best time.
But this is the problem for the new players is there's so many special rules. There's a real large number of special rules and they're all, like I said, everything's open, everything's available for free. But you really need to know how, at least I'd say about 70% of them work to be competitive in a game. If you're going to go to a tournament, and you really need to know how they work if you're going to be competitive.
Oh, crazy. So, okay. So let's say you started playing tomorrow and you played one game a week. How long would it take a person to be somewhat familiar with most of the rules.
Yeah, that's a good question. So they run there's an official escalation league, which is how they sort of suggest to introduce people to it, and so I think that runs for six rounds. So it's meant to be played over sort of 6 weeks, and the escalation leagues start off just by being a straight up firefight. So I start with 3 guys, you start with 3 guys. I start with sort of 6 guys, you start with 6 guys. Let's just kill the hell out of each other, and then they gradually introduce some special rules. They introduce camouflage. They introduce martial arts. They introduce combat drops and all combat deployment and stuff like this. So, and then hacking's a real pain in the ass to learn. And then that's sort of done last. So if you do it by the book and you're getting a couple of games in per round and just practicing what you've learned, over 6 weeks, you should be pretty comfortable with the game.
Okay, cool. So that's not too bad. That's actually that's pretty decent. That's pretty decent. That's probably about the amount of games it takes a person to learn their own army.
Yeah,
40k or AOS, really.
Yeah, I think if you know your own army, that's a great start. As long as you know what your army can do, then you can sort of fight someone else. I mean, I played a guy in a tournament the other day who destroyed me. And he's he'd only played the escalation league basically, and then he had a good enough sort of idea about his army, and it took me apart. So I mean, as long as you've got a bit of experience in tabletop wargaming, I think if you play an escalation league, you should have a pretty good idea of where you're at. Yeah,
wicked. No, that sounds really cool. That sounds an escalation league. I'm gonna have a look into that. I'm actually pretty keen.
Well, I'm going to bring that up in a moment on the ITS. So. It's one of the sort of the better parts of Infinity the game. So I'm just going to bring this up on another screen now. So basically, ITS is what they call the Infinity tournament system. So I'm not sure if either of you guys have ever played War Machine with the steamroller.
No, neither.
Okay, so ITS is what they call the official Infinity tournament system, and so that builds in with Army Builder.
Okay.
So I might just come back and share my screen at the moment, and I'm going to go back into Army Builder for a sec, and then I'm going to talk about ITS. So if I can manage to do that again,
present to
screen share
for you. Right, you are presenting now.
Thank you. I'm just trying to share my screen. Do that. All right.
Isn't it fun being live?
yeah. It's not something that we do on the White Noise. So this is the Army Builder here, which we've already had a quick look at. So I'm just going to bring up one of my lists, and I'm going to show you how it sort of builds into ITS. So here we've got ITS. So this is all stored server side with them, so they can look at what sort of lists people are building. And then if they think a model's too powerful, they will change the rules for it, and it changes within Army, and then it goes out across the board. So,
so do they do that on the fly and then say, by the way, we've done this?
They'll tell the community. So normally, we've just had a couple of traitors in the game. So they've gone and put their heads down because everyone thought they'd sort of betrayed the human sphere, as it's known. So they were unavailable in ITS. They've been taken out and they've been brought back with new stats sort of after about a month.
Ooh, interesting.
All right. So here we've got a bit of a sort of a standard sort of army list here. So I'm just going to move this over here. So here we can see my 2 combat groups. So we can see here Group 1 has 10 regular orders in it. And then Group 2 has 3 regular orders in it. So we can see up here that I've used 5.5 of my 6 SWC, and I've used 300 points.
Okay, so SWC is special weapons cost for everyone.
Special weapons cost, yeah, that's right. So a large amount so you can see what I've spent my SWC on. I've spent it on a hacking device, a missile launcher, a sniper rifle, and my Swiss Guard here, who's a beast of a unit and comes in at 2 SWC. So he's pretty good. So what's important is see how we've got an ITS with a big tick.
Yep, and some random anime chick that's just popping up.
That's right. So this shows you that when you build a list, there are some rules to list building, and I won't go into all of it right now, but basically the army builder will tell you whether or not it's a valid list, which is good. So you can know you can go into a tournament.
If it's not a valid list, does it show you where to correct your error?
Yeah, it should. So if I delete my lieutenant and then click report, it'll tell me there is no lieutenant.
Ah, cool.
That's awesome.
So I'll just reload that. Otherwise, I'm going to get lost with what I'm doing. All right. So this is back to my list. So it's got a army code. So you can use this to post on a forum. So we can see an army code here. So you basically cut and copy this, you put it on a forum, and it means anyone else can reproduce your list and see what you've taken.
Dude,
you got the
so
ability.
weird.
You've got the ability to save it, and you've also got the ability to print a courtesy list and print an army list. So I'm going to take you through an army list first. So if you click the print button, just give it a moment because I'm running on my slower machine. Just wait for the preview to come up. So this is something that you'll use in game. So it puts it out in a format that you can print out, and then it has all the stats for all your models. Has what weapon loadouts they're taking, and then if it also splits them into the 2 combat groups. We can see combat group 2, combat group 1, and then down here we've got a list of weapons. So we can see. I probably just need to zoom in a little bit more. So we can look at, I've got a boarding shotgun. So it will only populate weapons that are actually in the list itself. So it won't populate every single weapon for the game. And so just looking at the boarding shotgun here, so it's showing within 8 inches, you're in green range. So you're at +6 to your target number. So if I've got a model with a ballistic skill of 13, that goes up to 19 if I'm within 8 inches. So 0 at 8 to 16, and then -3 out at 16 to 24.
That is a big distance for a shotgun. That's huge.
Yeah, and then
24 inches for a shotgun. Wow,
that's huge.
Yeah, but this obviously changes. You look down here at a sniper rifle. So -3 range up close, 0 range at 8 to 16, 16 to 48 inches is +3, and then 96 inches, which is basically the full length of a 4x4, pretty much, is at -3. So if you're on one diagonal to another, the sniper rifle can actually cover that.
Right.
We can see here the damage value of each of the weapons. So, heavy shotguns have got a damage of 15, where your standard combi rifle, which is the standard weapon for most sort of line troopers, is coming in with damage 13. Here we got B, which represents the burst value. So this is what I was talking about before. So my biggest gun in this list is the heavy machine gun. So that's coming in at 4 burst. That means in my active turn, I can roll 4 dice. It gives you some different types of ammo. So you got AP, so armor piercing ammo, normal ammo, electromagnetic ammo, which sort of lock down robotic units, flash, fire, shock, explosive. So there's a lot of sort of different weapons there.
Yeah,
and then it gives you some. Yeah, so there's a lot of material there, and you got to be careful you don't get too much. And then it talks about other traits. So shotguns have teardrop templates which come out behind it. So if you hit someone, you can hit everyone behind them as well and stuff like that.
Right.
And then moving down, we've got hacking programs. So it'll tell you. So in this list, there's a hacking device and there's also a killer hacker device. And then it tells you sort of what your attack mods are, what your opponent's mods are, and it basically takes you through what your abilities are on your hacking devices. And the last one's just a chart for one of my guys who's got he can juice himself up pre-game. Now, the reason why this is important for your list is, as we can see here, we can see 10 guys in the first group, and we can see 3 guys in the second group. Now, 2 of my guys actually have camouflage abilities. So the Swiss Guard is one, and the Hexer is the other. So if I get rid of this, just need to, how can I cancel out if I just hit escape? And then I hit on my courtesy list. So this is actually a list that will be given to my opponent. So if you zoom in here, so yeah, I can print this out and it'll show him there's only 9 orders in group 1 and 2 orders in group 2.
Okay.
So straight away, there's 2 guys missing on the courtesy list. So that gives me the option. So if I've got someone who's a camouflage guy or someone who's an airborne deployment guy or something like that, and it's not going to go on the table, I don't have to tell my opponent. So they have rules about what's open information, what's closed information.
Right.
And until a model's on the table, it's closed info. So I don't need to tell my opponent about it at all.
So because they've got that camouflage ability, that then puts them into that other. Right.
Yeah. So my list shows me that I've got it. So I don't need, in case I don't want to forget about it.
Yeah. But the courtesy list doesn't, because they have that camouflage ability. They don't have to be.
Yeah, I don't have to tell my opponent they exist.
Yeah.
So basically, he goes, "What's in your list?" So after deployment, I say, "This is my list. Have a look," and then I don't have to mention in the rules at all anyone who's not on the table. I can say that is everyone in my army legitimately, and it's not an underhanded trick. That's Infinity sort of 101.
Yeah.
And that's why it's got such a steep learning curve, in my opinion, is because there's a lot of sort of stuff going on behind the scenes. So
that's brilliant. I love that. No, that's
yeah. So I'm just gonna have a quick look at my notes and then come back to the ITS. So yeah, so this is what they call the ITS mission pack.
Okay.
So this is
available free as
this is available free.
I love that.
So this
whole
So this talks about the basic rules for playing a game. It talks about basically how to run a tournament. And then it talks about, it goes into the missions. So if you look down here, we'll take loot and sabotage is a bad option. Hang on, I'll just see if I can get a. All right, so this will be quadrant control. So before going into a tournament, your TO will tell you what your objectives are going to be, or what your missions are going to be. So quadrant control, it tells you how it's scored. So dominate the same number of quadrants as the adversary, dominate more quadrants than your adversary, and have your data tracker in a dominated quadrant. And then it talks about classified objectives. So in Infinity, you have a deck of cards which basically have secret objectives on it. So during the game, you have a secret objective to achieve that you don't need to tell your opponent about. So your opponent doesn't know what your secret objective is going to be. Now, this entire game, that'll add up to 10 points. So it tells you about how the game's going to be played. It tells you about some special rules for the scenario. And then it talks about how to deploy. So here we can see deployment zone A, deployment zone B. You can see you've got a 12-inch deployment zone, and it shows you where the quadrants are. So nothing in this mission requires you to kill another person.
Okay.
So that's something that's very you need to think about with Infinity, is there's nothing in this mission. You could quite easily win this game and not kill a single model.
So you could really play to the mission to win.
Well, you have to play to the mission. The reason why you have to do that is part of the Infinity tournament system is, as far as, I'm just see if I can find it quickly. Here we go. So if you win by more than 5 objective points, you get 3 tournament points. If you win by 4 or less, you get 2. You get 1 for you get 1 point for a tie and 0 for a defeat. So this is where I was talking about the other day, where my opponent tabled me in my first turn in a tournament. But because I'd had more major victories throughout the day, I was actually able to cover him getting a minor victory, even though we were both on the top table together.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important that you do play to the mission. Now, one of the things that you can do with ITS is if you go to ranking, so everyone gets a ranking.
Oh.
And so here we got a worldwide ranking. So we'll look at this guy. So we can have a look at someone's profile. So we'll have a look at the #1 player in the world. I won't show you mine because it's quite sad.
Oh, dude, own the suck. Honestly, own it.
Yeah.
All right. So so it uses the ELO system, which I'm not sure if you've ever played chess, is the same system they use to rank chess players.
Oh.
So it starts off by giving you some basic statistics. So you can look at Lear Baggs recently played a tournament where he finished first. He's finished second. He's finished first. Plays a lot of games, obviously. Finished 6th down here. Shows you how his rounds have gone against his last opponent. So he's had a 10-0 win here. He's had a 7-2 win here. lot of big wins, a lot of major victories. So from here, you can then go into achievements. So it's got obviously achievements that you can play within the ITS.
Oh wow!
And it also show you who your nemesis are and the people that you own. So these are the people that he's played recently. And so the people in the red are the people that have smashed him. And then the people in the green, I've got a slow computer, so it's sort of difficult, are the people that he's beaten. And then you can see the people that your opponents have been playing and how they've played them. So yeah, so that's sort of part of the ITS. So what I'll do is I'll just
a specific large wargame company needs to sort of sit up and take notice of this shit. I would say just quietly, but
if we could just like,
I'll just stop sharing that for a moment.
Get a whole pile of links and just send them to GWHQ and just be like, hey guys, just I know you guys don't like, you know, listening anyone else's ideas except your own, but
yeah, it's funny because I'm about to talk to you about how they make money out of this, and they use what's called an official tournament manager. So all the tournaments are run through their systems. So basically, when you go to a tournament, the tournament organizer gets online, loads up the tournament manager, and everything's managed through the tournament. So you submit army lists through the tournament manager, which is done through, like, it all links together. So Infinity Army talks to the tournament manager. So you save your list in Infinity Army, you load up the tournament manager, say, I'm going to play this tournament. You submit 2 lists online. So you go into a tournament and you can take two lists, and so you can choose which list you're going to play for each mission.
Ooh, that's cool.
So yeah, so you can take sort of, you know, I tend to take lists based on whether I'm going to be fighting a straight up opponent or whether I'm going to be fighting a camouflage opponent. Because if you fight a heavily camouflaged opponent, you're not ready for it, I find you get smashed. But then some other people play for the mission. Oh, I really struggle with this mission, so I'm going to take a single list just for this one mission at the game, the tournament. But tournament codes are actually, you have to pay for them. So they're not overly expensive. So I think a one shot is a couple of bucks. So if you want to play a single game against a friend and you want it to be recorded officially, then yeah, you pay for a one shot, which is about $4 Australian off the top of my head.
Huh.
Or they sell what they call tournament packs. So tournament packs come with about a couple of codes in them, so you can run more than one tournament from one tournament pack. But they also come with a limited edition mini, which is given to the winner of the tournament. So what we'd normally do is everyone chips in for a tournament pack that pays to have the tournament official. So everyone can see how their rankings are going compared to everyone else. And the winner gets the limited edition mini for that season. And so each season, the mini changes. And it's not always available in all armies. So it's, you know, whether or not it's desirable for your specific army, but they are limited. So they only come in the tournament packs and they're only available for that one season while things are going on. So Corvus actually make a bit of money selling these tournament packs and selling codes for people to play with. And then basically they have satellite tournaments, which are held throughout the year. So there's about 12 major tournaments worldwide. CanCon's one of them. And if you win a satellite tournament, then you get invited to their big tournament at the end of the season. It's not all expenses paid, but you get guaranteed a ticket because I think it's capped at 150 places, and they normally sell out. There's pre-registration and stuff like that, so they sell out pretty quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's basically it for the ITS. So yeah, basically all the missions. It obviously doesn't stop you from using different missions or playing sort of missions with your friends or anything like that sort of. But there's so many different types of missions available. I'm just trying to have a quick look and tell you how many. I'd say there's probably about a good 20. And actually, what I'll do just quickly is I'm going to share my screen again. I'll just show you the Escalation League. Where are we? So if I pull that up, so this is the ITS again. So we can see down here, we've got rules for an escalation league. So if we go to page 60, where are we? Hunting Party is the last of the ITS missions. It will tell you basically how to run an introductory league. It's got league control sheets. It tells you what you're going to do, basically how you're going to kill it, tells you how you're going to deploy, tells you what missions you're allowed to what rules you're allowed to play per mission. So here we go, round 5. You've got secret objectives, tells you how many points, and basically it builds it up. So if you look at round 1, I think it's coming in at 100 points. Where are we? So there's round 2. Yeah, 100 points. So it's about a third of a normal size game. And then it will talk you through it round by round on how to introduce sort of new and varied sort of troops to the game as it goes along. So that's the ITS. I think the ITS is one of the best things. And basically that they'll take away missions every year and they'll introduce new missions. And yeah, that's basically sort of how they run it.
That's wicked. So they can just keep switching it up. So let's say you had someone in the meta, in your local meta, who was really good at just smashing like a couple of the missions of the current mission set. Then Corpus Belli releases new missions, and all of a sudden, they're
everything's changed again. Yeah, basically.
Again. Oh, I love that. That is so good. That is
yeah. So some of my favourite missions actually disappeared at the end of last season, which I'm really sad about. They had these what they call these armory missions. So they had this massive building in the centre of each table with it was filled with weapons. You can go in there and loot it, and they went. So I'm very sad about that.
That's wicked. That's wicked. And you've got there are missions where you can like rescue civilians, or you have to assassinate high-profile targets.
Yes to both. And some of the missions, the civilians can fight back, and yeah. So there's lots of. They basically split it up into 3 types. They have direct action missions, which are more killy. They have special operations missions, which are very opposite. It's all about button pushing, controlling antennas, and opening radar dishes and stuff like that. And you have joint operations, which are a bit of a mix between button pushing and killing. So
that's cool.
The special ops missions, you don't really need to kill people, generally speaking. I mean, like I said, you still do. Yeah. No, there's. I don't think I've ever played a game where no one's died. Played a lot of games where one person's died horribly, but yeah, generally there's still a fair bit of fighting going on. It is still a fighting game, but you've always got to have it in the back of your mind that to win the actual game, it's based on the objectives, not on how many points you got left alive, and that's a tiebreaker. So at tournaments, you have your victory points, which is basically how many points you've got left alive on the table. That's used as a tiebreaker only. It's doesn't use to determine anything else.
Oh, that's brilliant. What an amazingly different system. It's refreshing, nearly.
Yeah. So what I might do is I'm just going to bring up the homepage. I can show your viewers where to find the rules if they ever want to have a flick through.
By all means.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll screen share again. I think I've got this.
Try and include a lot of these links in the comment section for the video.
I can shoot that. So if you just go here, so it's called Infinity the Game. You do need to make sure you look for Infinity the Game, because if you think about the word infinity, there's a lot of mathematical sort of stuff going on and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, but don't try to Google what is infinity. It gets you nowhere.
Correct. So just go to Infinity in the Game, go straight to resources and go to downloads. So we can see it here. And here we've got a list of profiles. Don't even bother looking at that. Just use Army. It's probably the easiest way to do it. We've got the rule book there, which I'll open up in a second. We have weapons profiles. Once again, you don't need to do that. It's all done through Army. FAQs, and here we've got season 9, which is the ITS missions. So you can find that all there. And then if you go down from memory, we've got, if you've got an A4 printer, you can have a look at all the markers. So here you can print out and cut out. If you want your regular, you can stamp them into whatever you want. So you have your order tokens here, lieutenant. We've got sort of impersonation tokens for those that are sort of impersonating other players, retreat tokens, all that sort of stuff. And I'll find you the silhouette tokens, which is what I was talking about earlier.
I think back where you were selecting before. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
So here we go. So we got silhouette 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So basically, if you print these out, and I've just stuck mine onto cardboard, and it shows you, so basically cover works if a third of your model is covered by terrain, then you're in cover. So it shows you sort of a height reference as well for your silhouette tokens there. So yeah, so basically,
what does the black square represent? Is that like the center of the model or the center of the card, or?
Yeah, that's the center. That's the center of the silhouette. So yeah, I actually don't know why. I don't know why. So some of the acrylic ones will be split up into little a grid pattern, so you can work out exactly where a third is. But yeah, so if you've got a trooper model and it's lying down, in reality, as long as it's standing up in the game, then it's going to be that height. So if you've got a robot and it's got these massive, one of my robots has got massive wings because it's sort of like a jump robot and stuff like this. It's actually wider than the silhouette value. So it's something you need to sort of be aware of and stuff like that. Yeah, and some of the bigger robots and stuff like that are actually bigger than the silhouette values there. So that's all the markers. And then if we actually go back up, we can have a look at the rule book. So once again, you won't get any fluff with this. So if we just pull up the rule book quickly, I'm not sure how quick my computer is going to be.
No, it's going to be quicker than mine, don't worry.
Yeah, so we can see it loading now. It's going to be a few hundred pages from memory.
Pretty good. A few hundred free pages.
Yeah.
No complaints.
All right.
Free. I like free.
I like free.
Yeah. So so there's a few army lists in there as well and stuff like this. But basically, yeah, so all the rules are completely free online. You can download. Like I said, no fluff though. And so here we go. Look at this is all special skills. So regeneration, paramedic, hackable, metachemistry, mechanized deployment, marksmanship. There's a lot of rules in there that all sort of link up with other things. Infiltration can be used with camouflage, which can be used with surprise shot and stuff like that. So this is where, like I said, don't expect to sort of get your head across it straight up.
Is a little bit more steeper than other game systems, like you're saying.
Oh, can you just scroll back up to that picture of the table? I don't think. There we go. Look at that.
Yeah, so that's sort of. I don't think that's a full 4x4. Looking at the mat, I think that's one of the mats that come with one of the starter kits.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably a little bit confusing, but yeah. So basically, yeah, everything's sort of free online, and yeah, definitely hit it up and have a look if you can.
Lovely, absolutely. Send me those links, and I'll throw them in the comment section. I mean, not the comment section, the drop down thingamajig for whatever you calls it these days.
No problems.
No, that's wonderful. Wow, look at that. That's free rules. It's a different game. It's very intuitive. Lots of different factions. It sounds very dystopian sci-fi.
Yeah, no, it's pretty standard for games, isn't it? But it's like I said, it's good fun. It's probably I've been gaming for a long period of time, and I think it's probably one of the better balanced games. Well, it's easily the most balanced game I've ever played. Basically, we say to people, go off the rule of cool. If you think a model looks good, it'll probably play pretty well on the table, with a few exceptions, but. And there's no real sort of overpowered models to the point where they can't be beaten, because at the end of the day, everything's going to die to a crit. So yeah,
wicked. No, that's brilliant. Like I'm really looking forward to painting up my Pano and getting them on the field.
Yeah, cool.
I'll probably sit there and hover behind you while I'm watching you learn this and learn it myself. It's now that I've sat with you, it's a lot more intriguing than I thought it would be, put that way. So.
Yeah, I'd say just download the rulebook and just have a quick read. And like I said, as gamers, I'm sure you'll get a reasonable head for sort of how it sort of operates. But yeah, it's sort of the best I can do in sort of an hour and a half sort of thing.
Absolutely. No, you have done an absolutely fantastic job considering the scope of the task that I approached you with all those weeks ago. I'm like, hey, just teach someone all about Infinity. Just the basics.
I think, The nice thing about learning gaming these days is the internet's such a great tool, so you can get up and watch some battle reports. And like I said, the worldwide campaign with Beasts of War drops in about a week, and part of that, people will be uploading a lot of videos because you can get achievements and stuff like that for uploading video battle reports. So
nice.
if you want to have a look, head to beastofwar.com, and I'm sure there's a link, and there's a lot of sort of high end sort of websites that go into the worldwide campaign. It's actually quite pretty to look at. So just give it a Google and go from there.
Brilliant. No, definitely look forward to it. That's going to be really keen to kick off with, and I'm sure our local groups are going to be in and all over it. So we'll definitely be liaising with the surrounding communities and hopefully seeing how it is. Was there anyone you wanted to mention now that we're starting to wrap up?
I might just throw a quick shout out to one of the sponsors for our podcast, which is Toy Soldier Imports. So on our podcast, we won some painting contests and stuff like that, and Toy Soldier Imports sell Infinity. So if you can't get it from your local, and we'd always say to people, support your friendly local gaming store. But they sort of supply a bit of Infinity. If you can't get it at your local sort of stuff, hit them up. So yeah.
Cool.
Definitely. You guys can check out the link as well. We'll throw that in the drop down tab, as well as well as the link for the White Noise podcast. Definitely hit them up. Ben and Marty are very, very entertaining. I spend a lot of time in traffic driving to work, and I usually got the White Noise podcast blaring in the background, so it's always
nice
to read. They've had some very interesting individuals on the show recently. Did you want to tell us about a few of the more recent ones?
Yeah, we've probably had some of the top players in the world have a chat to us. And like I said, they're just on another level. And I'm sure it'd be the same with sort of 40K players or something like that. If you speak to the top players in the world, they're just thinking about the game in a completely different way to, I'm going to throw you in the same bracket as me now, but you or I. I think it's just amazing the way they think about it. But listen, the other thing you do is jump onto Infinity Australia Facebook page. Huge online community. There's no gripes on there or anything like that. So if you're interested about it, join up to Infinity Australia, ask people where to start, find out where your local metas are, and pretty much all over Australia, I'm sure there's somewhere that's going to help you out.
That is fantastic. Man, thank you so much for just coming on the show and just taking the time to talk to us about a hobby that you're so passionate about. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be invited. So thanks so much for having me.
No problem. For all of you who have joined us tonight, thank you so much. And for all of you who are watching who haven't joined us tonight, thank you for watching. It's you guys, we do it. I hope you guys enjoyed the first official show of the Summoning Circle with our first official guest, Marty from the White Noise podcast. It's been interesting, and we look forward to bringing this out of sequence show alongside Aushammer a lot more often. So, Scotty, did you want to say anything before we bug out?
No, nothing really. Just once again to thank you, and like I said, I wasn't really expecting to be so intrigued. So that I thought it would just be another small sort of war game that not many people play, but it's actually opened my eyes that it's incredibly decent, and I'm keen as well. I'm probably as keen as Brindley is now.
Yeah, good. Free always helps, I think, in my opinion. Yeah, if you can,
that's a big point.
If your only outlay is going to be a sort of a half dozen set of models, it sort of makes it a bit easier to get into sometimes. So
it definitely makes it easy. Anyway, and with that, we assure you we'll be bringing more Infinity content through the Aushammer channel. There's going to be a painting tutorial coming up. For those of you guys who are interested, there is already a video of me gluing my fingers together, building some Pano miniatures. I assure you, all metal, all pewter is a whole new adventure, as opposed to plastic. And we did a little bit of a product plug with Irresistible Force on a few weeks back, so go check that out. Our next show is going to be on next official Aushammer show is usual in 2 weeks' time, where I think we'll be having a special guest speaker talking about his Kickstarter. So that should be pretty exciting. Who that is yet to be confirmed, and what Kickstarter we don't know yet.
Yeah.
But we're all about the professional organization here. Anyway, from all of us here at Aushammer and the White Noise Podcast, you guys have an awesome time. We'll catch you guys later.
See you later, guys. Have a good one.
Ciao. Thank
See
you.
guys. And stop.